There are lots of books showing you, lots of people telling you to do this particular technique that I'm going to show you now. But I think, in my opinion, it's not a good way to teach, not a good way to show you. And even though you can't say it's a wrong, I will show you another way that we're going to do it that I think is going to make your life far, far easier. My name is Andrew Berry, and welcome to At the Benches YouTube channel. So again, this is only my personal opinion, but when you get to the end of the film, you'll look at it and you'll totally understand my reasoning for it. And if you do it this way, absolutely fabulous. And if you do it the way other people tell you to do it and books show you to do it, please have a go at my way. And I'm sure you will find it far, far easier. And the product, the ring that you'll be making will be much better quality, more professional, and a lot stronger as well. So what the heck am I talking about? Well, we are making up very, very simple stacker rings. What's a stacker ring? It's basically one ring that sits next to another ring that perhaps would sit next to another ring, and they all stack together. Stacker rings, very, very simple. The shanks are nice and plain. These stacker rings are usually made out of wire. The shank is wire, round section wire. We got some beaded wire with this one here. Now, making up these rings is no problem at all. Lots of people tell you the right ways of doing this, other people tell you the wrong ways. Check out my film by here that I will show you the reason why I do it my way. Very controversial film. It's produced a lot of comments, which I'm really pleased about. Anyway, so making up the ring, no problem at all. But the problem is now when you come to add perhaps a little bit of an embellishment upon the top, or your setting, or whatever you're gonna put on top. As I said, I've got 3 different rings here that we've made in the past. This one's a nice silver one, round section shank, half a dome, beaded section, gold disc. What's this? Round section with a little gold tube soldered. Now all these are sort of soldered on top of the bands to enable the rings to stack flush together like that. No problems at all. This is where the problem comes. You're going to add these little embellishments on the top. So you get the ring, you bend it around like this, you cut through it, you solder it. The ring has one solder joint where you've joined it. This is just one I just pulled out of my little box here. A nice, simple, plain band. Now, for instance, I'm going to solder this bit of a setting. It's huge, I know, just for don't judge me on this, will you? This is purely for demonstration, just to give you an idea what the heck I'm on about. So we need to solder this setting on top of the ring. Now, this is the problem. A lot of books, a lot of people will tell you to find the solder joint. Okay, so for argument's sake, I'm just going to get a red pen to draw where my solder joint would be on this ring. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a nice red line around like that there. Okay, so that now, pretend, is my solder joint. Now, a lot of books, a lot of people who don't have the experience, who have been taught by other people who don't have the experience, or just simply teaching because they've read a couple of books, is get the setting, get your solder joint, and solder the setting on top, directly where your solder joint is. It's not wrong. There is no real right or wrong way when it comes to jewelry making. So you have your setting here, you solder that on top. This joint here could be soldered with a hard solder, a high melting point solder. And now we need to solder this setting or an embellishment or whatever on top. So you've got this, you may use some easy solder, you may use some medium solder. So you come and you solder this on top. Now this is my problem. You are soldering on top of another soldering joint, and while people may say, yes, but it's going to make the ring stronger, isn't it? Because you've got this going over the joint. For a start, it hides the joint because it's underneath the embellishment or underneath the solder, so it's not really going to matter too much. Now, this is my problem. If you've just sort of started out on your jewelry making career and your soldering isn't fantastic and you have problems controlling the torch and the heat of the torch and so forth, and even if you're an experienced guy, lady like me, you still may have a problem, because if you perhaps overheat this particular setting when we're soldering onto the ring here, even though you may be using an easy solder, and perhaps the solder isn't flowing, you're thinking, oh, because I've got to add more heat because the solder isn't flowing, and I keep adding heat. What will happen is that the solder joint here, the solder will start to melt. And now if the ring is under any tension, the ring is going to just part slightly. And if the ring parts, the solder will melt and solder will stay where it is, and you'll get a line and you'll get a mark, and the solder will run where you are soldering. Now that is completely unsightly for a start, because if you look on the inside of the ring here, you're going to see a line, you're going to see a gap where the solder has run. That's my first problem. The second problem is then, and I shall demonstrate this now with another ring with the embellishment already on the top. So my solder joint is down here. Now, this is the way I like to do it. I will solder the embellishment opposite to where my solder joint is. So I will solder this on the top here. My solder joint now is down the bottom here. The reason why I do it this way is the fact that now when I solder this embellishment on the top, there is not much chance of this solder joint down here coming apart, because you can protect it in your third hand. You can hold on to it with the old pair of tweezers when you're soldering it, and that joint is protected. There is no chance that solder joint coming apart and showing. Fantastic. You soldered your embellishment on the top. The joint is down here. It's perfect, exactly as it was when you made the ring. Fantastic. Job's a good one. Okay, now, for instance, say someone says, well, I love that ring, but you know what? I want it to be made a little bit smaller. Okay, so say we have this ring now with our embellishment on the top, with a solder joint on the top. I'll come to it in a minute. Okay, so you've got to cut the ring. You've got to make the ring smaller. We're going to have to cut the ring, and we're going to cut the ring down the bottom here. As soon as you've cut the ring and taken a piece out and resoldered it, you now have a ring. Okay, this red mark is my solder joint. You have a ring that is now in two pieces, albeit they may be soldered, but you've got this one here to this solder joint, and this one here, from here to this solder joint. You have now weakened the ring. You have two solder joints in the ring. This area up here may not be that strong, and you've come to solder down here, and the whole ring falls apart because you've got two separate pieces. So, what I would be inclined to do is, obviously, because you have your solder joint at the bottom here, customer wants to have the ring resized, take a piece out, you cut through it, take a section out, solder it back. That now is your solder line. Guess what? You've only got one solder joint within the whole ring. There is no chance of the rest of the ring falling apart in two halves because there is only one solder joint down here. You've kept the integrity of the ring, you've kept the strength of the ring as well. Brilliant, no problems at all. Okay, the next scenario is, I want the ring to be made just that little bit bigger because it doesn't fit me. Okay, no worries at all. Let us come along and put a piece into the ring. So our solder joint at the top, where our head is, we come along, we cut through the bottom, okay? Then we put a piece into the ring and we solder it again. Now we have this little area here, pretending this is the piece now we have just put into place. And we've got two solder joints down here. We've also got this other solder joint on the top. So the ring is now in three pieces. This side, and the piece in the middle. You've got three solder joints. Now that really has weakened the ring tremendously if you're soldering. But if you come along, you always try and limit the amount of solder joints in a shank. So here is the ring. We need to add a piece into this ring. We cut through it, we add the piece, we solder. There we go. The ring, admittedly now, only has two solder joints, but it's still a lot stronger than this ring that has three solder joints. And we will always put together rings like this with the solder joints on the bottom for this particular reason. It only really works with things like stacker rings and so forth, because when you talk about things like making up your own settings, you always try and make it so there's only one joint, and again that is at the top where the actual, perhaps the Rex setting or the Coronet setting or the Tiffany setting will be soldered. So always try and minimize the amount of solder joints in a ring. So I'm not saying the way that the books tell you, that people tell you is wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. But think about how strong the ring is going to be. Think about how good your soldering techniques are. Whether you can get away with doing it this way, and if you can, that's fine. I haven't got a problem with that. But I always like to make sure that the ring is strong, make sure that when I come to solder, there's no chance of other solder joints coming undone. And yes, you could weld joints. You can make sure that if you're doing platinum work, you will weld the joints, and there are then no solder joints because the weld is the original metal and it's a continuous piece of metal. Totally understand that. But for making stacker rings like this in silver or in gold, try and minimize the amount of solder and seams in a ring to make sure that it's far, far stronger, and it's going to make life easier for you when you come to solder it in case you happen to mess up or overheat the joint and that solder joint comes undone. So there we go. That is my way of putting embellishments and settings onto stacker rings. Why not give it a go? Let me know. Pop some comments in the boxes down below. Let me know what you think, whether you think this is a good way, whether you think this is a bad way. Which way do you do it? I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget, please, if you haven't subscribed already, please do. Love you too. Smash that little bell icon if that's something that you're into to be notified when films go live on our YouTube channel, and I will see you on the next film. Take care. Bye for now.